These are the worked answers for test number 2 in the spring of 2021. Question 1 is a subtraction sum, and you won't get the full marks unless you show your working, including how you're borrowing. So writing this out in a column format, I cannot subtract 1 from 0, so I have to borrow from the 2. I'm going to pass that 1 along column by column until it reaches the end. I now have 10 from which I'm going to subtract 1, leaving me with 9. 9 take away 3 leaves me with 6, and 1 take away 6 I can't do, so I'm going to borrow again from the next number. I have 11 now from which I'm going to take away 6. That leaves me with 5, and I have 2 with nothing to take away from it. So my answer is 2,569. Question 2 is a division, which I'm going to do in a bus stop. 7.2 divided by 6. I'm going to do the division and ignore the decimal point for the time being. How many 6's are there in 7? That's 1. Remainder 1. How many 6's are there in 12? There are 2. This decimal point I'm going to trace up into my answer so it's in the same place as it was in the question. 7.2 divided by 6 is 1.2. Question 3, writing 75p as a fraction of £5 can't be done all the while I have these mixed units. So I first need to write £5 in units of p, and that's 500p. I can now write my fraction, which is 75 over 500. The next mark is to fully simplify this fraction, which I will do by dividing both sides by 5. 5's into 75 go 15. 5's into 500 are 100. I see that I still have numbers that can be divided by 5, so I'm going to do that again. Reducing my fraction now to 3 over 20. That is in its simplest format. If you had been able to identify that 75 and 500 were both divisible by 25, you could have jumped straight to the answer. But it doesn't matter how many steps you take, as long as you get there. Question 4 is a ratio question, and I'm asked to write the ratio of the number of books on a small shelf to the number of books on a large shelf. And position is important, so I'm going to write the number of books on the small shelf first. That's 12. The number of books on the large shelf is 36. There is my initial ratio. Now the question asks me to give the ratio in its simplest form, so I'm going to do that by dividing both sides by the same number. Now you can do this in a number of steps, but I can spot that both numbers are divisible by 12, so I can do this in one step. 12's into 12 go 1, 12's into 36 go 3, so my ratio in its simplest form is 1 to 3. Question 5 is an estimate question, and when I have an estimate I am going to round every number that I come across to one significant figure. By doing this, I then make the calculation much easier to do in a mental way rather than a written format. So rounding, my first number, 467.2, will round to 500. 36.1 will round to 40. They are both to one significant figure. 21.3 rounds to 20 and 5.4 rounds to 5. I can do these sums now in my head. I multiply the 5 and the 4 to make 20. Then I add my 3 extra zeros. I multiply the 2 and the 5 to make 10, and I have one more zero to add. The final part of my sum is to divide 20,000 by 100. I'm going to simplify by dividing by 10 and then by 10 again. That means I can knock off the pairs of zeros top and bottom as I go. I'm left with a fraction that is 200 over 1, and we must remember that any number over 1 is just the number itself. So my answer to this question is 200. With question 6, I've already drawn out two tables. That's so that I can complete an unordered stem and leaf diagram followed by an ordered stem and leaf diagram for my final answer. I first look through my numbers to see that my lowest number is in the 30s. My highest number is in the 90s, so my stems are going to be 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 and 90. I'm now going to go through each number in turn, transferring the data onto my table. I'm going to cross the numbers out as I go to make sure that I'm transferring all of the information correctly. I have 16 pieces of data there, so I'm going to check that I've transferred all 16 to my unordered diagram. I have. I'm now going to repeat the stems on my ordered diagram, and I'm going to rewrite the leaves, only this time in numerical order. Again checking that I've got all of the information transferred. The final mark in this question is allocated to an accurate key. So I am going to, in my key, say that 50 represents 50 centimetres. I'm then asked for the modal height of the sunflowers. So I'm looking for a repeated number on any one line. And I can see that down the bottom here, I've got 2 3s on the same line as the 9. What that means is the modal height of the sunflowers is 93 centimetres. Question C is giving a description of a calculation, and Chloe says to work out the median you add together all of the numbers and then divide by how many there are, and we have to decide whether that's correct or not, of the mean. The median is calculated when all the numbers are in order and we pick the middle value. That's a description of the mean, and the median is calculated when we put all of the numbers in order and pick the middle value. The final part of the question is saying that Henry believes a third of the sunflowers are more than 80 centimetres tall. Now there are a number of different ways to working this out, but if we worked out what a third of 16 was, it's actually not a whole number. It's approximately 5 and 3 recurring. We can see from the figures that there are 5 numbers, 5 sunflowers that are greater than 80 centimetres. This is less than a third. We have a number question here for question 7. We're looking for special numbers from a list given. And the first question asks for a square number. Well, the only square number in this list is 9. The second question is asking for a multiple of 12. And looking at the list again, the multiple of 12 in the list is 48. There are 2 prime numbers in this list. You're actually only asked for 1. So for a correct answer, you will give either 2 or 23. There are 3 factors of 24 in the list, and again you're only asked for 1. So a correct answer would be either 2 or 6 or 8. There are a number of elements to this biscuit question. The first step is to realise that in order to break down the amount of ingredients we have already, we need to transfer our kilograms to grams. Being that there are 1,000 grams in a kilogram, we have 2,000 grams of flour and 1,000 grams of butter. The next thing is we have a list of ingredients that makes 20 biscuits. What we need to do is we need to identify how many of the ingredients we need to make just one biscuit. So what we're going to do is divide each of these numbers by 20. We need 5 grams of flour. We need 6 grams of butter, 4 grams of icing sugar, and 1.25 grams of chocolate. Now I refer to the ingredients in my cupboard. My next step is to divide the amount of ingredients I have in my cupboard by the number of ingredients it needs to make one biscuit. So dividing 2000 grams of flour by 5, I can make 400 biscuits. Dividing 1000 grams of butter by the 6 it requires to make one biscuit, I can make 166 biscuits. 340 grams of icing sugar divided by the 4 grams it needs to make one means I have enough icing sugar for 85 biscuits. And my last calculation, 200 grams of chocolate in my cupboard divided by 1.25 grams of chocolate that it takes to make one biscuit means I have enough chocolate to make 160 biscuits. Looking at all of those answers, I'm limited by the amount of icing sugar I have. Therefore, the maximum number of biscuits I can make is 85 biscuits. This kind of scale question we find very difficult. First of all, we're asked for an estimate of the height of an average man. In this instance, I'm going to use the estimate of 1.8 metres, but any number between 1.5 and 2 metres will be correct. The scale I have is by measuring him on my paper, and I can see he's 1 centimetre tall. So my scale is 1 centimetre equals 1.8 metres. I now measure my Tyrannosaurus. He is 4 centimetres tall. Therefore, I need to work out if my Tyrannosaurus is 4 centimetres. It means I need 4 lots of 1.8 metres to give me the height of my Tyrannosaurus. That makes him approximately 7.2 metres tall. The final question on this page is a rounding question, asking me to round my number to 2 decimal places. So that's the number that is in the 1, 2 second column after my decimal point. So I'm going to round my number to that point there. The 8 is bigger than 5, so I add 1 to the very next column, which means my rounded number is 27.96. The coordinates of the outlier on this scatter graph are going to be approximately 20 by 140, written 20, 140 in brackets. Make sure you write the x coordinate before the y coordinate. We're asked to give a reason why this doesn't fit with the rest of the data. Very often outliers are incorrect because of an error in the data collection. But also, in this instance, where we're plotting the temperature at midday against the number of ice creams sold, it could be that we have a considerable amount more ice creams sold because of a reason relating to the day itself. Maybe it was a Sunday or a bank holiday. So the reason here the final question is asking us to predict the sale of ice creams at a temperature of 28 degrees centigrade. And unfortunately, our data actually doesn't stretch to this kind of temperature. So we cannot predict the sale of ice creams at this temperature. Because our data would be unreliable.